warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier. And also, if anyone competes in athletics, he's not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. The hardworking farmer must be first to partake of the crops. Consider what I say, and may the Lord give you understanding in all things. So this is serious business, gentlemen, that he's trying to confer here and confirm with us that ministry, and obviously he's writing to Timothy, who's pastoring the church at Ephesus. He's struggling under the weight of his calling. He's a very young man, pastoring, ministering. He's got inferiority complexes and fears, and he's easily intimidated. And so a lot of 1st and 2nd Timothy is the Apostle Paul communicating truth and revelation to a man who's very insecure and struggling with his calling. So I'm going to pick up on this very text 2 weeks from today when we start a new series in our Serious Men's class. But I wanted to just communicate that to you. You know, it's one thing to sit in the luxury, which is what it is, the luxury of a mother church like this. This is a luxurious atmosphere. You know, there are people, they do nothing but complain. They do nothing but criticize. They see faults, they see flaws. That's all they look for. That's all they look at. They're looking for opportunity to chip their teeth. But the reality is that this church is a luxurious atmosphere that God has created. It's an oasis of revelation, of opportunity for you to grow and develop as a man of God. This congregation has incredible assets that are available to furnish you with opportunity to grow in ministry. You have opportunity for ministry here in this congregation that is not available everywhere, just not. And so you should be in a position, especially if you're called to preach and you feel that calling and you really do want to do something for God, you need to learn to take advantage of the opportunities that you have here and now. You'll talk to a lot of men, and I don't know what these men are going to say, but you'll talk to a lot of men that are out in the field now, and they say things like, I wish when I was in the mother church I would have. Because one way or another, if you come and tell me you're called and you want to preach and you're doing as much as you can to get sent out at the soonest possible opportunity, I don't see everything in your heart. I can detect some things perhaps, but there's dynamics within the confines of your own heart that can be masked or shielded. I don't see everything, but when you get sent out there and now you're faced with having to pioneer, having to communicate with people and try to inspire them to come to your church when no one else is. You know, try that on for size. You're inviting people to come to this church now. You know, and when they come, they may go, whoa, this is great. But when they come to your pioneer church, there's nothing great about it except you. Hopefully you'll be great enough to inspire them, friendly enough to inspire them to keep coming. So those are some of the things I want you to be thinking about. I am going to focus, this Serious Men's class is not just for men who are called to preach. Some of our churches limit their Serious Men's class to that, and they want to only minister on that level. Here I've chosen to open it up to every man in our church who wants to grow in their ministry, in their leadership, in their calling. You know, according to the Word of God, every man, by virtue of being a man, is a leader. If you're a single teenager, you have leadership qualities that can inspire other young people to serve God. If you're married, you're obviously the head of your household. We select men to lead Bible studies, to lead outreach, to function in different positions of leadership in the church and in the congregation. And some of those men won't ever get sent out. Not every Bible study leader is necessarily called to preach, but they serve as a leader in the congregation. They have teaching credentials, they have testimony, and they have something to say and something to impart, and so many of them can be fruitful Bible study leaders. But I am going to focus, when conference is over, on preparing men to get sent out and talking about that. And of course, in the doing of that, there'll be things for everybody. So it still won't be limited, although I'll be emphasizing that. So I've asked Angel Ortiz, who's been pastoring for a number of years in a number of places. He pioneered our church in Los Angeles. What year did you get sent out? 97. So he's been pastoring over almost 25 years now, currently in Cuba, and that's a brand new experience for him. He pioneered in Juarez, I think, for a couple of years, but Cuba's been another total experience. I've been to Cuba once for him, and I've never been to a country like that. Just such unique features. Communism has held that country in a stranglehold since the Communist Revolution in whenever it happened, 1958 or 59 or so. Andre was sent from here, and that was another kind of rapid situation. He served as door director only for a few months, and then the door opened there, so he was sent to Orlando, took over a church that Randy had pioneered, Albert Martinez had pastored, and then when we moved Albert to Clearwater, we sent Andre to take over an existing, functioning, self-supporting church. And then, of course, Herman pastored in Tampa, and then here as Spanish pastor, and now as a missionary to Colombia. And one of the things that I mentioned, I preached that sermon a few months ago. Actually, I was going to preach it in Prescott, but I shifted gears and did something else, so I preached it here the Sunday after Prescott, and then I preached that same sermon on producing preachers was what the sermon title was. I preached that in the conference I preached at in the East Coast this last week, and one of the unique features about Herman's ministry is that he has produced preachers. Andre was his disciple in Tampa. Nick and Michelle Rogers are now missionaries in Cuba. They were disciples in his church, and then of course his son and his wife Destiny are missionaries along with him in Colombia. So Herman, through his function as a pastor, has produced preachers, and I view him as one of the more successful pastors. Not that he's had a large church, but there's something about his life and the quality of it that imparted into these men what is necessary in order to produce preachers and missionaries. And so that's quite a testimony, Herman, and we value that very much. So I'm going to start by asking a couple of questions, and I want you to pick it up, whatever's on your mind. These are men now. All of them have a lot of experience in ministry. They were all raised in this church. Andre, of course, began his life as a Christian in Tampa, and then when we closed that church, we moved him here, and Nick and Michelle Rogers here, and we furthered their discipleship, and now they're fulfilling their destiny. So let me just begin maybe by asking Andre, as you went into an existing church, what were just talk about some of the things that were surprises, maybe some of the qualities in your life that you, as you landed there and started ministering, you realized you didn't have, and you had to start developing those. What was the biggest surprise getting there, taking over a church like that?
I would say the biggest surprise was, when you're a Christian, you know the devil is real, but when you get sent out into the field, the devil is really real. So I felt, you've always said in Serious Men that you become the target when you get sent out. And I definitely was surprised by the assaults that came upon my life, upon my family, my kids. And I realized that I had to I had to go out and fight spiritually. So that was one of the biggest surprises. Taking over a church that already functioned with disciples and it was a self-supporting church, I had to then now figure out how to juggle, investing my time with these men in this church, my marriage, my newborn son, and just getting in a groove of things to make sure that everything is all kept in place. So I definitely felt that I could have asked more questions in the mother church, as to why we do certain things instead of getting sent out and then having to ask it. So I definitely felt that there were some areas where I lacked. I didn't feel as confident as I did when I was in the mother church, getting sent out, taking over a church.
Very good. That's a great point that he makes there. A man with a weak or faltering marriage is going to have major problems in the harvest field. I haven't always paid as much attention to that as I should have. But your marriage better be solid when you get sent out because, as he said, assaults come. I remember when Renee and I went to London, just the funky sense of demonic dimension operating, undermining our marriage, trying to undermine our marriage and interfere with my relationship with my wife. There's agitation. There's a dimension of oppression that you have to break through and pray with your wife and make sure your marriage is solid. And that's what you can do while you're here. That was a great comment that you made. And the other thing, you mentioned questions. Sometimes you don't know what questions to ask. And I think what Andre learned is that some things are, you have to have a big learning curve. You don't know very much when you get sent out. You have to have a huge learning curve. When I got sent from London to here, I was dropped into an atmosphere that I had no experience with. Men out in the field, a larger church of several hundred. I'm coming from a pioneer work in London, and a lot of people would say, well, he may not be qualified, he may not make it, and I'm not the one that chose me to come here. But the point is that you'll learn. You'll learn or you die. And you have to have a very big learning curve when you get sent out and acknowledge, I don't know very much. I've learned as much as I think I can in the mother church, but now this is a whole new arena. It's just like going into battle. I've mentioned before that General Eisenhower's biggest fear on D-Day, when 176,000 men were going to land on the beaches of Omaha, that 100,000 of those men had never been under live fire before. And his big question was, are they going to be able to advance under live fire? He didn't know. So those are some of the dynamics. You get put in a situation and you have to perform, you have to function. So that is very good. Angel, why don't you just talk about some of the unique dynamics of, you've pastored here domestically, pioneered here, taken over churches here. You've done just about everything. Cuba's unique. Talk about some of the things that surprised you, you didn't consider, you didn't think about, or just some of the unique things about pioneering, not just as a missionary. Maybe you can talk about that in general, but also Cuba in particular and some of the unique dynamics about Cuba.
Well, in pioneering, you really have to, one of the things when we function here at the Mother Church is there's already everything set in place. And so we learn how to do things, but when you pioneer, you have to establish things. And that's, you have to build from the bottom up. And so you come here, chairs are in order, everything. So when you pioneer, that's one of the things that you have to establish. Nothing's established, prayer, anything. And so you have to establish those things. And so we have a way we function here in the U.S., and we have a pattern, thank God. And if you follow the pattern, things will start to work. And but my greatest challenge going into Cuba was that I couldn't follow any of the patterns. And so I had to just go back to trusting and depending on God. And sometimes we do become through the years you learn some things. But going to Cuba, I had to just say, Lord, just show me, and depending on God, and which was hard because after a while you kind of know what to do. But in Cuba, I had no clue how to start. I couldn't get a building. I couldn't really witness, and then just God showed up, and that was the greatest thing is when you see God show up and He begins to do things, and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? And you just run with the flow and trust and depend on God, and it's a wonderful feeling to just not know what to do, but just to see God doing stuff and just getting alongside of God. And that's one of the things that one of the funnest things also that it is. But to trust and depend on God.
You know, one of the unique dynamics of Cuba is that Angel had to figure things out. When he says things don't go according to pattern, here in America and a lot of other countries, we have our guy go there. You find a building. We rent the building. We buy equipment. We set the equipment up. You get flyers printed. You do outreaches. You have events. You show a movie. You get a band from a church nearby. You get an evangelist. None of that in Cuba. And it's up to him to figure it out. I'm not there. You've got to make it happen. You've got to figure it out. That word I used in battle, there's a word, I think the word, I don't remember, maybe Craig could correct me. I think it's the word frago. Is that right? Is that the word? Or something like that. But I had a guy doing some work at my house, and he said when they were in a battle situation in Afghanistan or Iraq, and their battle plan was being interfered with, in other words, the way the battle was playing out and the way their plans were developing, they couldn't do what they originally planned on doing, and so they'd look at each other and say, frago, that means got to change. And you make things up as you go along, in a sense, and that's what Angel had to do going into Cuba. Like he said, you just can't get on a street corner and preach. You can't witness. Everybody there is in fear of the government. Same in China. We send our missionaries there. They have to figure out how they're going to function. We don't, like he said, we have patterns here in America, but they don't work everywhere. And so where the pattern doesn't work in the context of how to open a church, you have to figure it out. I can help you, but I don't remember Angel calling me every day, Pastor, this isn't going to work. We can't get a building. He just accepted. You learn. You start getting a feel for things, and then you start making a connection with people, and that is the key. So what were just talk a little bit more about the first converts you got and how you got them there in Cuba.
So I met this guy, and I didn't know how to start. So I met this guy, and I was kind of leery to witness to him because you got to be careful who you witness to. And so he actually took me to a museum, a Fidel Castro museum. I'm like, oh man, this is a communist spot. But he invited me to his house to eat, and I obliged. I didn't want to eat, but I obliged, and so I went to his house and ate, and just befriended him, and just began to witness to him. Just tell him about Christ and what God can do, and just we became friends, and before you know it, I was able to preach to him and witness to him, and he got saved, and then I told him what we're doing, that we're going to start a church. And he's all like, well, where? I says, well, I'm not sure. I need somebody to lend me their house. And he's like, okay, well, we'll look. And so after a while, he tells me, hey, why don't you just do it at my house? I says, that's what we need. And we just started there. And then he got into it, and he started inviting his friends. I just started talking and befriending, the people around me. And the people that sold the groceries, the people that, and before you know it, they would come to do work or something, and before you know it, I'm just inviting them to a Bible study, and it just lit up. God just started to move, and people started to get saved. And we don't have a building. We still do church in a house, and his house, but we're having an incredible time.
Yeah, there's the God factor. You're not there on your own. God is involved as you function and minister. Herman, you took over the church from Pastor Contreras that he had pioneered. You had your experience in Tampa, and then sitting here, a Spanish pastor, and then we drop-kicked you into Colombia. And you're taking over a church now. You're pastoring. So just talk about some of the dynamics that you went through going there, maybe something that surprised you, something you had to adjust to, and what the early days there were like for you and your wife and daughter.
Yeah, I think the first thing we went through is the culture shock. You're not used to functioning the way they do things. They just give you an idea. I just paid my rent. It takes me 3 hours to pay my rent. You go stand in the line. They have lines for everything. You stand in the line to go into the bank, and then you go into the bank and you stand in another line, and then you pay your rent 3 hours later. You know, things just work really slow. You go to a restaurant, you order your food, it's gonna take an hour to get your food. It just takes long. Everything takes a long time. And so that's kind of what you're getting used to. But as far as people, you get all kinds of people, and so you're having a lot of the language. The language is a little different, you know. Mine's Chicano Spanish that I learned here, and so. But I've learned a lot of Spanish there, you know. You learn a lot of stuff, and so you gotta go past all those little barriers, and then just. That's what we've been going through, just adjusting to the culture and the way things run there. And one of the things I was remembering as you were saying that things function different is like our outreaches. Nobody has a car, you know. And we're used to driving to the west side and doing a concert there, or to the east side parks and stuff. And so we walk there, you know. We carry our speakers there and we walk there and we do concerts and stuff. But you just got to do things a little different. But they're used to it. Because, I mean, they're just used to walking around, and they're used to getting around the way they do, you know? And so you just got to kind of adjust to the way they live, what they like. You're kind of looking around to see what they like to eat. You know, they like a lot of bread and stuff like that. And so that's what you serve for little events, you know, for movies and Bible studies. You give them coffee. The coffee was already there, Richard, established there. They love coffee, so we have coffee all the time, you know. And so it's kind of just getting used to the way they think and the way they do things in their daily, you know.
What was the main thing you found different about pastoring there than here, if anything?
They're people. They have the same problems, the immorality, everything's the same. They have drunkenness and drugs, and I don't think there's anything different as far as their sin. The sin's the same. It's more of the culture and the way they do things, you know, but the sin is there. It's like any other sinner. And then just learning to communicate with them. They're very emotional.
Amen. All right, so let me open it up then. And if you have any questions, I'll take you a microphone. Let's stick to questions, not comments. So if you have a question for them about anything that comes to mind that you think might be helpful for you and for others, let's have hands. Pastor Jerry.
So all of you have taken over churches. What would be some good advice from any of you to help anyone in here that would actually go and take over a church? I pioneered and taken over, and they have different dynamics, and we could all use help when it comes to coming into taking over a church. What are some of the things that you did that you found were successful, or maybe not so successful?
Well, first, if you've never pioneered, you got to understand that when you go to a place, here we have leadership and door director, Bible study, you're the leader, and people help you and already do that. So, but when you go take over a church, you're not the leader, you're like a stepdad, and you just took over somebody that they love, and they think you're the culprit, and so whatever the reason was. And so what you got to do first is just win people over. You can't disciple them. You have to just love them and win them over. And once you do win them over, they'll do anything for you. But you have to go in there, not guns a-blazing. You got to go in there and just love people, fellowship with people, and do everything you can to win them over. And again, don't try to disciple people for the first 6 months. Just love people, win them over, spend time with them, and then they'll come under you and want to serve God and do the will of God. But first, you got to love and win people over.
Andre.
Yeah, that was well said. I would also say just let them know that there's a greater purpose at hand, that, there's pastor changes, but the vision continues. I know Pastor Roderick gave me some good advice. He said, preach vision. Every service, preach vision as much as you can. Let them know the church is going in a certain direction, and that, God is, he's the chief shepherd over everything. So I think that's one thing that I went into Orlando, and and I made sure that I let all the disciples know, hey, one day you're going to get launched, we're going to grow, we're going to plant churches, and just keep the vision the main thing. And also, kind of to piggyback what Angel said, the tendency is to want to start chopping heads. Like, what is this guy? What's going on? Why is the paint? Why is the wires hanging? You want to change everything, but I just you gotta resist the temptation to do that and give it some time, and then over time you can change it. When they're not looking or something.
Yeah, that's a good question. I can tell you guys that one of the biggest problems in our fellowship, or the things that we struggle with the most, is church changeovers, where a pastor goes from where he is and we send someone to take over. This is a major problem. We have a basic ground rule: change nothing for a year. People get very offended. Their pastor has just gone, and if he was their first pastor, he's their spiritual father. They don't like this. You're excited when you go into that church to take it over. You're excited. You're ready to, go guns blazing. They don't like this. They don't want it. They didn't ask for it. And so you've got to be very careful to ease your way in very slowly and very gently. The other factor is that the pastor taking over is always going to see things that he thinks the former pastor did wrong. If you dare to take the position of criticizing something that was part of the former pastor's ministry, or something that he did, you're dead in the water. And you may be right. Maybe something he did wasn't perfect, or wasn't the way you would have done it, or wasn't the way I would have done it, but it's the way he did it. If you go in there and within the first month you're starting to switch and change, and you don't like this, and he should have done this way, you're dead. You won't survive there, and you're going to find people start leaving that church. So you've got to be very careful. Like I said, I'm not exaggerating the point. This is one of the biggest problems in our fellowship, is when we replace a pastor, and some seasoned pastors make big mistakes. So you got to be and you have this instinct to want to change. You know better, you're smarter, you're on fire, you're hearing from God. You want to take this church somewhere. You just got to pump the brakes, slow down, ease your way into this, and then after, as he said, you win people, you get people connected with you. You always compliment the former pastor, have him back in, within 2 years to preach a revival. Your credibility and your testimony among your church will rise as you are favorable toward the former pastor. But if you treat him as an enemy, you don't want him around anymore. You're making big mistakes, and all those kind of mistakes that are made are instinctual. It's kind of, it's natural to us to function that way. You got to function against your instincts. Amen. Very, very good question. Evangelist George.
Yeah, Andre, this question is for you. When you were out there, you said that there was questions that you didn't, that you wish you asked when you were here, that would prepare you, for the stuff that you saw over there. And then Pastor Stevens even brought up a good point and said, sometimes you don't know what to ask. Is there something that right now you can think of that you can, share with us, or some of the new disciples out there, pastors that are here, that you would, that you saw out there that you wish you could have asked here, or could have got you ready here, or you could give advice to help us, if we were ever put in that situation?
I would say to every disciple that want to get sent out, I would ask, why we do what we do, to be honest, because that gets challenged when you get sent out, not only by other people, but by even yourself. Because when you don't see the fruit that you want to see, does what we do really work? So I would ask questions. I would ask, why we have the order of service we have. Why is there such a focus on men? Just the practical, simple things that you take for granted. You come into a church, it just operates. You kind of want to ask that, because like Angel said, you want to establish that when you get there. You want to reinforce it. So I would say just like fellowship pattern would be a big thing, and you know, discipleship questions and things like that.
You know, one of the last Sunday schools, I don't know if it was one of the last ones, Pastor Richard, but in the last few years, Pastor Mitchell did a Sunday school on the fundamentals of the fellowship. Is that the one we're giving out in the pastor's packet? Yeah. So we're going to be giving that out this week, and that will help answer a lot of those questions. And there are answers to those questions. Why do we have the TV thing that we do? No TVs or movies. Why? There's a reason for it. It didn't just pull it out of the air. Nobody else does that in the world today. But there's a reason why. There's a specific event and circumstance that occurred that caused Pastor Mitchell to think, we got to deal with this. And so the whole thing of divorce, if a man is divorced after his conversion, they can function in a lot of ministries in the local church, but they can't pastor. There's a reason for that. There's a why. There's answers to those kind of questions. You know, the other comment that comes to mind, when you're a door director, when you're just functioning in the local church here, let's say you invite someone to church, or you pray with someone at the altar. Let's say Pastor Ernie goes to you, gets someone. You know, your whole future isn't invested in whether that person comes back to church or not. I mean, you want him to come back. You want to reach people. You want to bear fruit. But it's different than when everything rides on whether or not you can get people to come to church. You follow what I'm saying? It's a totally different thing when everything depends on it. Whether that person that you're working with comes or not, you're going to come to a church of hundreds of people, and your ministry is going to continue. But when you're pioneering, that little story that Angel shared about meeting this guy, everything's riding on whether Pastor Angel can get this guy to come to church. Otherwise, nobody comes. Everything's riding on him. So those are some of the dynamics that you have to think about. They're not just going to come because you print flyers and you have a storefront. I remember an experience when I was pioneering in San Bernardino. We had a building and nobody coming, or very few coming. And I remember my son, I was standing behind the pulpit like this, getting ready for service to start, and nobody was there. And then a visitor walked in, a lady with her the little baby was walking, so probably about 2 years old, walked in. Joe came running down the aisle. Dad, someone's here. There's a visitor. Calm down. Let's act like this happens all the time. But everything's riding on you. And when you're pioneering a church, people are going to come. This may sound, like blasphemy to some of you, but people are going to come because they like you. You've connected with them somehow. Here, things are established. There's a whole lot more than just me here. There's you, there's ministry, there's function, there's a crowd, there's dynamics involved. But when it's just you, they have to like you. You have to be able to connect with people and get them to feel comfortable coming to a church where no one else comes. And when they can go down the street and there's 100 or 200 people there. So very, very good answers to those questions. Anybody else? All right, Raymond, and then Pastor Angel.
I guess this is for all of you. We've seen a certain dynamic with the youth, and I'm praying that revival happens. I'm curious on all of your guys' church, especially in the U.S. and outside the U.S., how the youth, the younger generation, are receiving the gospel. Is there like a drive? Or is it what's happening with the youth? Or are they like kind of like pushing back against it? I don't know. Just curious.
Andre, you got some youth in your church. What's going on there?
Yes, that's a very good question. We do have youth in our church. Actually, I'm going to testify about this, but we had a bunch of 19-year-olds get saved, get filled with the Holy Ghost. One is actually coming to conference. And I would say they're looking, the youth, I don't know if it's just the Orlando area, but they're looking for something. They're trying to find, something to get into, something to give them fulfillment in life. That's what I've seen in the youth, especially the ones that have gotten saved in my church. And I would say just putting vision in them and letting them know that they're the future of, the church and the world. I would say just trying to impart your spirit, let them know what you've done as a youth. And I would say all those things play into factor when it comes to the youth that I've seen, especially ones in my church, just trying to interact with them, giving them vision and things like that.
Yeah, it's like anything else, Raymond. You have to build every one of our ministries on a foundation of conversion. We tell our pastors, you don't build your church on religious people. You may in your initial outreaches, let's say you're pioneering somewhere in the States here, your initial outreaches, somebody from another church who's disgruntled over there sees your flyer and they come and they look good and they give money into the offering. We've said it 100,000 times, and I've made the mistake before after having heard, don't build your church on religious people. I built my church, didn't build it, but I started assigning people positions of ministry, and then they leave. They don't show up a Sunday morning. I had a song leader in the church in South London. Religious guy came. I felt like they were sincere. They were committed. They wanted to come. And then one Sunday, he didn't show up. And then I couldn't get a hold of him. Finally, I got a hold of him, and he said, oh, no, my wife and I decided we're going to be going to this church or that church. And in his mind, he hasn't done anything wrong. In me, I'm feeling betrayed and let down. I'm crushed. I'm broken. But in his religious mind, he hadn't done anything wrong. This is just how they functioned for years. So you don't build on religious people. You build on conversion. You got to get young people born again, saved, and experienced with Jesus. That you get a few of those, and that can fire spreads. Very, very good. What about it? What about youth in Colombia? Have you found any differences or any dynamics involved?
Yeah, you know what? Recently, we discovered we had 2 rappers in there, and so we began to do rap concerts and getting them out of the church, not having the concert in the church, but doing concerts in the barrios there, in the neighborhoods. That stirred them up. It's everything we do stirs people up, and I believe preaching, street preaching, and concerts, and everything that we do is made. Well, God made it so that we could, be stirred, man. We're stirred about souls, and we're stirred about, bringing out the people in the neighborhood from listening to the concerts, and so we've gotten youth from that. Carlos just texted me. He had a movie on Friday, and he told me that he discovered there's another rapper there, and he had brought his brother, because I had just preached about bringing your brother. So he brought his brother to church, but in it, in what we do, people are stirred to bring other people in, and I believe it's in everything that we do is what begins to bring some fire into people,
Amen. Very, very good. Anybody? Angel. Over here, Angel had a question.
So obviously the mother church is a different forum, and it's, so going in from this type of setting, all 3 of you have pioneered and some, with the exception of Andre, but taken over a church. There's a different dimension. It's a leadership church, and obviously that's what we want to impart. But without, going overboard and trying to, we want to implement all these things, but just not without, I guess, trying to hurt the work. And there's been some comments made, but what has helped you guys to put this in place without, causing a disruption and just making sure that people, I know, Andre, you mentioned a little bit, but I don't know, maybe some of you guys can.
Angel, why don't you answer your own question? Because Angel went into a very unique situation in San Jose where there were people that had gotten saved waiting for us, right? They were waiting for a pastor, but when Pastor Angel landed, you had some particular unique issues. So first, before they go at it, you answer your own question. I know you're not used to talking to yourself, but...
That's a good question, Angel. Obviously, there isn't a manual for this, so we don't really, that's what they say. You're going to learn everything out there, and so I think what helped me, obviously I wasn't taking over a church. There was a particular group of people, but all I did was love on these guys. I remember when Germán, the main disciple there who took over the church, at one point in his life, he came to me and he says, I'm gonna leave. I didn't hold him back. I says, okay, that's good. So he takes off to Monterrey. He says he found a job, and while he's there, things aren't playing out for him. So, he calls me back, Pastor. So I just, but my point is that I just love people, and that's the key. Pastor said it. Just build relationships, and in that, I think you're able to win some folks, and they just kind of, it just ride the wave, and so that's what helped me, obviously. And
yeah, one of the unique dynamics, if I remember right, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is the guy that was kind of in charge of that group of people. They're saying, we want a pastor, we want a pastor, we want a pastor. Well, we gave them Angel as a pastor, and Angel goes there like we do, and he starts, serving and preaching and ministering, and this guy didn't like being, right? That was kind of the dynamic, and he ended up leaving. Yeah, he ended up leaving, and it was because of him that the whole thing got started. He was a dynamic witnesser, got this group together, but he didn't adjust to, the reality of what having a pastor means. So you got to be able to work, as he said, you work with people, but you also have to put up with betrayals and people taking off and all of those things. So why don't you guys weigh in on that? I forget what the question was now, but I'm sure you remember.
Well, I would say also learn to be a little flexible.
Yeah.
We do have a pattern and a structure. I'm not saying anything within the standards, but you don't have to. Okay, we're gonna go outreach. We're gonna hit 3 streets. We're gonna do. If your guy says, hey, why don't we just go and talk to the people over there? It's like, yeah, great idea. Let's do that. Be flexible with people. You don't have to be so militant in how we do it. I know. They don't know what to do, so they haven't seen everybody in the church like in this mother church doing everything. So you have to establish. But they're going to offer ideas, and you don't have to reject. In the fellowship, we don't do this. You just have to. Oh, all right, let's do it. Just kind of be flexible with things that you don't have to. One thing that helped me so much one time with Joe Moreno had preached a sermon where somebody wanted to do a calendar. And he said, no, we don't do calendars, and he destroyed this person. He preached a whole sermon on that. And you can let people, hey, can I put a vase on the thing? Sure, go bring some flowers and be flexible with people. You don't have to be so, this is the way we do it in the mother church. And yes, keep to the standards. I just had all my guys read the book and do the Bible study of why the standards. But, be flexible. Okay, we're going to do an outreach. We don't have to pass 10,000 flyers this day. Let's just go talk to these 10 people over here and just win one. So whatever they want to do, you can kind of go with the flow and be a little flexible with things.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that because getting there, like I said, I'm trying to get used to what these people like, and so they'll make suggestions, just like Angel said. One of the things we have once a month, I kind of toned it down because it was almost every fellowship. They have a chocolatada. They like hot chocolate with cheese. And I know it's kind of gross for some people, but they like that. That's what they like, And so we have it on once every month, just to kind of try it, but it works. It brings people in. They invite people and they tell them, hey, we're gonna have a chocolatada after the service, and they like that stuff. So that's how we bring people in, and they enjoy that. But they came up with it. They're like, hey, do you guys like hot chocolate? We started talking about that, and we have chocolatadas, like a fellowship with hot chocolate and bread. Hey, let's try it out. We tried it out. We have people coming in from that. So you gotta kind of hear them out, and just go along with. Yeah, they're going to get their chocolate, but we're trying to get souls into the church, But it's part of also building that relationship with them, that you're okay with their culture. You're all right with something like that.
Yes, amen. Over here, brother.
I'm gonna try to ask this question the best I can, but as far as working, like let's say you're a pioneer pastor, and you're just trying to build up the church, and let's say you're ready, right? You tell pastor, hey, I'm ready to go, like you don't have to like send funds to the church anymore. but it doesn't happen your way, and things happen, and you're having to find a job or having to like, look for another type of income, what's like your take on that? And also like taking over a church that's already established, but numbers aren't adding up, and you're having to find a job, right? How does that work?
I would say that's a good question, and I'm definitely going. I was going through that for the duration I've been there. I would say a lot of things you got to kind of trust God with. You just got to believe God, but you do also have to, be realistic. You got to get a job. You got to work. You got to support your family. I would say you got to really just leave it to God. And Pastor told me this. I called him and I was asking him questions. He says, be practical in your faith. And I would say, one of my prayers is, God, you put me here. I didn't come here to work. I didn't come here to make money. I came here to build this church, go full time, plant churches. So I've put a lot of things in God's hands. God, you brought me here. I need help. I need finances. And, the church, there's months where the church supports. I pay my rent. The church pays my rent. I can use the church funds to go to conference, things like that. And then there's some months where I gotta figure it out, like Pastor always says. But I would say trusting God. Obviously, if it's getting too crazy, you want to call the mother church and talk to Pastor and figure things out. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, finances are critical. A church grows financially in stages. When we plant a church, the mother church is responsible for all the expenses of the church. Rent on the building, we furnish equipment and all of that. You're responsible to get a job and support your family. So when I send someone out, that's first. You get a job, get your family stable financially, get that happening, and then we will, you can do both kind of at the same time, but it's a priority. Don't get ahead of yourself. Get a building, get equipment set up, and you're opening the church, but you don't have a job yet. So you got to get that done. And then, as your church develops, so the first year and a half, Pastor Mitchell's adage was that if you're not able to pay your rent after 18 months, you got to think about what you're doing. If the church that you're pioneering is not bringing in an income where you can pay your rent. So that's the first objective financially. You build a crowd, get people coming, start teaching them on giving and the indigenous church principle, how we function as a fellowship. You put those things into them. I always utilize the offering to teach. You don't have to take an offering for 27 minutes. You can teach a lot in 3 or 4 minutes about tithing, about giving, about how our fellowship functions, that, we're responsible here for our own financial upkeep. Let's give, So once the church then is paying the rent and paying church expenses, and you can maybe pay for a revival, you can have an evangelist come in twice a year, pay for it, hotel, love offering, and so forth. Then you start on a trajectory toward becoming a full-time pastor. And I had someone send me a question the other day. Do I believe in working pastors planting churches? And generally, no. It's like a teenager having a baby. It's premature. The church should be self-supporting because you're going to have to support that church. And if you're working a job and you're planting a church, you're kind of working against yourself. You're not going to be able to do very much beyond that, beyond getting one guy out there maybe. So you get the church. This is, it's theoretical what I'm describing, but it's how we function in stages. You get to be a full-time pastor, then you can start developing men to get sent out and pioneer churches. And there's balances. One of the problems we have is a lot of our pastors are the best employees on their job, and they can make 50, 60, 70,000 a year. When you go full-time, your income is going to drop 50% in some cases. But if your objective is to be a full-time pastor, you need to make sure you're structured so you can handle that. Okay, I can go full-time, church takes in this much, this is my rent, this is what I need every week to survive, and then we make the decision, let's go full-time, right? So, and you involve your church in that. I've got into some churches and put them on a pledge. Your pledge is going to go to the support of your pastor, that sort of thing. So it's a progressive thing. All right, anybody else? Let's do one more. Brother, I don't know your name, but way in the back there.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris. One thing that I've noticed is really overlooked is, pastors, they bring their families along. And so a lot of times it's a culture shock, not only for them, but for their families. So my question would be for all of you, how did your guys' families really handle you guys getting sent out? And I know you guys brought your kids, and Pastor Andre, you had a newborn son. How did your family really handle that and in your guys' situation?
That's a good question. So, yeah, my wife, she's Mexican. Her family is all here. It's a big, Mexicans are real tight knit and things like that. So it was real difficult for her to leave El Paso and go to Orlando. But I would say what I've learned is that I have to be there more. I got to make up for more. She doesn't have her friends to go to, and I can go do something else. I got to kind of monitor her more. Make a conscious decision to spend time with her. Like Thursdays is her day, and when we're able to come to El Paso to visit, we do. But I would say just being there more and just gauging it.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, monitoring your wife, But that is a powerful truth, is that you better pay attention to what's going on in the home, because as he mentioned earlier, there's a demonic assault that comes to every pastor who goes to pioneer, take over a church, goes to be a missionary. You're going to get nailed. You're going to get hit by demonic assault. So you do have to cover your wife, protect your wife, quality time with your wife, and make sure that area of your life is covered. All right, we've gone on quite a while here, so we're going to finish with that. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate that. Amen. Let's all stand. We're going to be in for a great conference. Open your heart. Be in prayer this morning at 9 if you can. Sunday school at 10, of course. Service this morning and tonight. Herman will be preaching this evening. So we're looking forward to a great week. Let's give God praise, worship the Lord. And then I'm going to ask if George Ponce Sr. would close us in prayer. Father, we thank you for the grace of God.